There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello, and welcome out there in podcast and YouTube land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys. Hopefully you stumbled upon us or someone told you about us or you found out about us. And we are so glad you're here. It's going to be an interesting day today when we talk about it.
Days. You mentioned days.
Said. Very well said. But we normally like to welcome you guys. If you're new to us, we'd love to know a little bit more about you. Maybe leave a comment down below, like, subscribe, do all those things you're supposed to do. But we'd love to hear your comments and what you think and how you found us, maybe. And if you're returning, we're so glad that you did. And you're here to witness us do this again. This is a podcast that is unrehearsed. It's a podcast that's unscripted. And basically, Tim and I are two guys that have talked about movies for almost our entire lives, and we decided, hey, why don't we do that in front of the world and let other people feel the same way we do, or not, or disagree with us, whatever. We don't know. My name is David. I'm here with my good friend Tim. Tim, how you been? What have you been doing? How are you?
I don't know.
Welcome to Johnny Has a Key.
I have no idea. I am great. I am very great because I'm a fan of the subject matter today. However, before we get there, we usually start with a genre, a week topic, something we may have done this week or seen this week that is related to our favorite genre, and mine is horror. And I decided to go back and watch a movie that I guess was really popular. I didn't really follow it at the time and has spawned very many sequels, but I had never seen it. So I watched The Purge.
Oh, I've never seen any of those. That's the government lets you kill everybody you can see, or whatever.
For like one
lawlessness.
night. Yeah, for one night of the year, murder is legal, basically, and people barricade themselves in their houses and try to avoid being killed. It's not a great movie. I don't know why it was so popular. It was pre. I don't know how to say this without getting political. It was actually pre-Trump, so there wasn't a lot of violent type stuff going on in the fringes of political society. However, this movie anticipated that. Only murder, thank God, has not been legal here lately. As you said, I never saw any of these. I thought I would give this a whirl. I wasn't disappointed. I thought that it was really going to disappoint me, but I can see I would not. I mean, let me just give you, I guess, a brief synopsis. A wealthy family is held hostage for harboring the target of a murderous syndicate during the Purge, a 12-hour period. It's not a day, it's a 12-hour period in which all crime is legal. And that basically sums up the story, which is set in one house with Ethan Hawke and his family. It's directed by James DeMonico. I thought, well, let's see what else this guy's done. I mean, this movie was a hit. Well, he's not done anything but Purge movies. He is like the Purge guy. So, and he also wrote it.
Anyway, what was the one we covered it, made for like $10,000 in his house.
Paranormal Activity.
Yeah, that guy went on and did like four of them.
And did like all the sequels. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Very similar. Okay. I thought the same thing. That's funny you said that. I thought the concept was a little too ambitious to be plausible. I'm really surprised that it spawned so many sequels because I'm not really sure where they're going with it. And I don't really care because I probably won't ever watch another one. It only gets 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's with 159 reviews. So I was like, it's not that bad. but I would only give it like a 60 or 65%. There are genuinely some scary home invasion moments in it. And Ethan Hawke
What's
is a solid
interesting,
actor. So,
it's interesting because you got my brain going in all these different places. Like, well, it makes sense if it was pre 2016 because the fringes were kept at the fringe then. And if they ever
true.
found an outlet for violence, they loved it, like the Purge. It reminds me of the Star Trek episode, what, Return to the Archons, the one where they had the festival. They called it festival, and for 6 hours it was just total lawlessness. You could rape, pillage, murder, kill, da, da,
Right.
da.
Exactly. That is a very good key for this movie. Yeah.
And also, it reminds me of maybe the concept itself, because it's political as well, almost reminds me of a Harlan Ellison type story.
It
Seems like
is
something,
very Ellison-esque. That is another good
yeah.
key. Look at you doing keys on my genre topic.
Well, you just gave it all to me. It was like boom, my head went wow. And so
Yeah.
maybe I have to watch this because it keys me to Wick, which I know you recently saw.
John Wick. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
I've only seen the first one, and everybody freaked out over it. And I was like, it's John Woo, and it's really well staged violence, but all it is violence. I've heard that
Well,
later on the series gets more into history
his
and character.
background. I've only seen two of those so far, but yeah, it's like a really violent James Bond type thing. He's like an agent or something that's in
Yeah,
retirement, and he keeps getting
but
pulled out of retirement.
you know how there was a time period where most of the influence of Asian cinema was all in kung fu, martial arts, samurai, all of that was the Jackie Chan's and the all of that type. There was an entire subgenre of that. This seems to be like the John Wick movies and the Expendables movies and even the Fast and Furious now seem to me to be like the Americanized version of that. It's how much action and violence can we throw together just really fast?
Oh yeah. I could see that. I could see that
So that's
for
where
sure.
my head went. But thank you for all that. I hadn't thought
Oh, I was
of
going to
all
say,
that
yeah.
coming from the
So we
Purge.
were talking about the Purge. David's talking about
Yep.
Fast and Furious. I don't know why, but
Details.
we will move on. What did you do in your genre week?
That's what our heads do, folks. That's what our heads do. So anyway, I am not ready to share completion of what I've been doing because I've been trying to catch up on a bunch of stuff. So finally said, since I'm a completist, I will go ahead and watch Star Trek Discovery Season 5. I will hate every minute of it, but I will still do it because that's the kind of fan I am.
Well, you haven't watched some of those Deep Space Nine ones either.
Well, I'm still a couple of seasons away in Deep Space Nine, yes.
You're
But
only a couple decades away.
I'll go back to it eventually. The issue, yeah, actually an issue I had with Deep Space Nine is same as Discovery. Actually I like one more character in Discovery than I do in Deep Space Nine. And they wrote him out the first episode of this season. So I was like, okay, well then my favorite character you just got rid of. Great.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's Fear the Walking Dead. Just
Yep.
bring one on that I like, and then kill them off the next season.
And just get rid of them. So I've been catching up on Discovery, but I'm not finished yet, so I don't want to talk about it yet. And the same thing with Fallout, the new series that came from Joy and Nolan, based on the game series from Bethesda. And so far, really, really, I mean, it is like the scales are the opposite on those. There's
sure.
like 1% of Discovery's pilot episode or season premiere this season that I like. And there's like everything is perfect about Fallout premiere. It's excellent, especially if you know the game. So that's what I've been doing. And then because of I had started watching Fallout, I also went back and just watched again the first 2 episodes of Westworld because I still think they're some of the best television ever made.
So you've been diving into series instead of movies. So
yeah,
that sounds like.
And that's where I get stuck on doing a genre a week because I'm not those who listen to us know that I'm not a big binge watcher. I don't really like binge watching because you don't have any time to gestate on the ideas or to think about, hey, the Purge is just like Fast and Furious or whatever. You don't have a chance to think about that because, and cliffhangers mean nothing to binge watchers. Because as soon as you get to the end of the episode, there's a cliffhanger. Let's just fast forward through the credits and get to the next episode instead of wait at least a day, maybe. But no, no, no. Can't wait even a day,
No,
let alone a
no.
week.
House of Usher. Follow the House of Usher. I'm not waiting a day. I'm
See,
gone. I'm in it, man.
that's the problem with Fallout is I have to force myself because it did like that. It all came out at the same time. And I'm like, no, I don't. I need to think and play and
Just
see where
give
they're
in,
going.
David. Give yourself over.
No, I mean, even when House of Usher came out, I mean, I didn't binge it totally. I did watch, I think, a couple episodes back to
I
back at a
watch one a
time.
night at least.
But yeah, I don't mind waiting a day, but
Okay.
I'm just not into it. But anyway, that's what I was doing. I'm catching up, and hopefully, in the episodes to come, I will give you my assessments of those two series. One, I
Wow.
guarantee, will be bad.
Well, that brings us to quite a splendid segue. Thanks for providing me that you were
Yeah.
talking about a series that is post-apocalyptic, and
Yep.
I talked about a movie that is on the brink of an apocalypse.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
are doing a little film that's close to my heart now that I've watched it again, called Day of the Dead. This is the 1985 movie directed by George Romero. It is the third film in his original Dead trilogy, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and this one. We just did a redux of Night of the Living Dead last season, so it's interesting that we covered that again and are jumping into this. I guess I should give a synopsis really quickly first. This is probably a few years after Dawn of the Dead, where basically the world is completely overrun with zombies now. There is a group of military and scientists holding up in a missile silo in Florida, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I don't think you could have a missile silo underneath Florida's sandy, watery surface. But aside from that, the film opens with a group of them out looking for survivors, and that's how they let us know that basically the cities are overrun. There is a scientist that is somewhat of a mad scientist character nicknamed Frankenstein that is working on domesticating the dead with probably one of the more infamous zombies of all of the Romero movies named Bub. But the military is getting out of control. They don't see why they're wasting their time with these scientists. They want to be done with them, and to the point of actually killing them. And of course, as in any good zombie movie, the motif I like is, what's worse, the zombies or the humans? It turns out that several of the humans are worse. And if you need to have a climatic moment, have zombies invade the territory. And they basically come from two different directions, from up above in an elevator and from out in these mines where they're hoarding them for experiments. So when was the first time you saw this movie, or what are your initial memories of this movie?
I seem to remember seeing this at the theater.
I think we saw it together at the
I think
theater.
we went to the theater and both of us were excited to go see it. And I think we ended up leaving still excited and maybe having that discussion on the drive home of where would you go right now? Would you go to an island? Where would you go? What would you do if you could? I'd go to a hardware store first, get all the guns, blah, blah, blah. It was so endemic at the time that you would talk about. I remember liking it. It was very interesting watching it this time because, well,
The same.
the first scene, for some reason, I even took the note, why am I watching this on a VHS tape? Because the first scene was really grainy
Yeah.
and gray, and then suddenly realized, oh, it's her nightmare. So, and now
Mhm.
it's okay and fine. And the rest of it was fine and in full, not 4K, but it was high res. But the first half of this, my notes are scathing. I just did
Really?
not like parts of this, especially the army characters, all of the army characters. I didn't
Well,
like how
one of them is
overblown they
not the
were.
greatest of actors. He's a
No,
little over the top. Yeah.
I didn't like how overblown they were. I didn't like how cliche their writing was. I got the biggest swinging dick in this place and all. I just thought, really? But once they introduced the Frankenstein character and once they got over that big, huge, long, I would have edited it down, scene in the cave where they're
The
having the big meeting, sit down or I'll shoot you scene. Once that was over with, and then the next scene is the scientist, and then the next scene is him actually coming into the meeting, the next meeting, where he's going, and what would you do with them exactly? And da, 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 and all that. From then on, I loved it and really remembered how much I had loved it. I love the black guy character. I love the pilot.
He's West Indies. I can't think. His name is John.
I love Bub. I love the effects. I love the way it's shot. I love the way the paranoia increases. So I have to say it was really mixed watching it this time because at first I was going, oh, Tim's going to hate me because I'm going to get in this. We're going to do the episode and I'm going to hate it. But then halfway through, I'm going, I'm really starting to like it. Oh, it's getting better. Oh, I really like it. And then it has all these just so memorable, I think, maybe because when we watched it, but I remember dude laying on the, biting into his dog tags and holding the controller with his arm already cut off and being eaten alive. I was going, I remember that image. So I ended up enjoying it. I like it. I would recommend it. It's got some great stuff to it. I just think the beginning is a little cliched in the writing of the character.
Some of the characters, yeah, because he wanted to give character, I guess, their own personality, so you would remember them when they died, which is important. We've talked about this. When you just kill people you don't know, it doesn't matter. But if you like them or remember them, it does. I came into this almost the exact opposite as you. I thought, I haven't seen, well, first of all, I think I saw it with you in a theater, and then I'm sure I watched it on VHS in 1990, no, probably about 2003. I bought a deluxe reissue on DVD of this, and that's the last time I saw this. So I saw this over 20 years ago for the last time, and I thought, I'm not going to like this. I was like, it's going to be dated, and I'm just not going to like it. But all of the movies are dated. Dawn is dated, and so is Night of the Living Dead. Like you, there are a couple of characters that do not, they're not great actors. No. But this movie has more good actors than it does bad actors. And they, like you said, supersede the story and take over.
4 of them are behind you.
Right. Right. Well, no, I disagree because I'm not crazy about the little guy in between Dr. Frankenstein and.
Oh, really? I thought he was decent. I liked him better than Colonel Badass.
Colonel Badass is the worst, and then one of the Stooges that's I can't think of his name. I'll get to him when we get to casting. He's a little over the top too.
Steel is the other one I don't like.
Steel doesn't bother me. Steel is the one that I can handle. It's the other ones that are a little bit characteristic or caricaturish.
Like Rickles, the giggler.
But anyway, as I started watching this movie, I was like, okay, the opening, first of all, the opening shot, and we'll get to scenes in just a second, to me is just iconic. It just goes boom, and it's just her sitting there against the wall with her head in her hands. And the music has got that warbly, like Dawn of the Dead music. And I was like, this is great from the very first scene. And then the music kicked in, and I was like, okay, it's synthesizer. It sounds like Dario Argento. So you've got some dated stuff there. Yep. And it came out in 1985. We should probably do a 1985 top 5 because this came out, Reanimator came out, Return of the Living Dead came out, a lot of good movies that summer. And by the time I finished this movie, I thought this is probably one of my favorite movies of the 1980s.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I was completely blown away by it when I rewatched it.
I think it has some high praise merit stuff going for it. I agree with you. I love the way the opening is done and the fact that we're not given this whole hook from the very beginning. We're given a fake jump scare, but then it's almost like he's intentionally picking up where Dawn left off in that we're in a helicopter. I thought that was a really clever idea. but then we don't immediately see the threat. I mean, they're basically on deserted streets and standing there and looking around, and we're not seeing anything. And then slowly it starts, and it's just so panic inducing that they're getting closer and closer. So I love that.
Mhm.
I loved Romero's just letting Savini go and experiment and do the stuff he did,
He
because
basically sacrificed half his budget to give Tom what he wanted.
some of the gore and the effects in this are tremendously well done. They're
Yeah.
just really good. I do think it suffers in the fact that it's not as much allegory or metaphor as Dawn was. Dawn was all about commercialism and
Mhm.
society breaking down, and he doesn't do that in this. I think the themes of, and one of the documentaries mentioned it, the theme of trust. This is the distrust of government, distrust of science,
Well, yeah,
distrust
and I
of
think there's a lot of the
others.
whole Reagan era stuff in it, big time.
Yeah, yeah. I
Beef
think
up
you
the
see
military, let them be in charge, that kind of bullshit.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is what happens when you put the military in charge of something. You know? So yeah, I can agree with that, but I think I just think that there was a whole like subplot or something missing in there that he could have done with what Frankenstein was really wanting to do. And also, there was a lot of references in Frankenstein's dialogue that we didn't know what happened. Like he kept talking about his mother, and you'll get praises and good. So where did that come from? Or, I was just really curious about his character and wanting a little bit more, because everybody else is pretty basic characterizations. I think she's got a little bit more depth, but that's mostly because of her performance, not her writing. The pilot guy, John, I thought was written extremely well and
Yeah.
done extremely well. And
McDermott
this
too.
and the same thing with McDermott. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Um,
that's just my initial takes on it.
I don't know actually where to go. I mean, I think we should go on to scenes, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's more I need to say. I guess
Well, you
when
said it
you
was
were,
your favorite of the 80s. Why?
because it's original, even though it is a continuation of a concept he'd visited before, it's a very original film. I'm working on a second zombie book myself, and I am finding that I am incredibly influenced by this film. It is in a lot of similar things are in my book. And then you were talking about motifs and the common things that we see in like George Romero films. And what I was thinking is that he is very much like Stephen King, somewhat anti-establishment, hippie-ish from the late 60s. And there's a little bit of that in this too, in the characters of John and McDermott, because they are the ones that distance themselves from all of it. They don't want to have anything to do with the science or the military, and they end up being the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is
Yep.
another good Romero-esque motif of this film. That's where I was going.
Yeah,
I knew there
that's
was something I had
interesting.
to
If
say.
you wanted to put a through line, the people that know their place, that know their own strengths and weaknesses, and are the ones that, well, not in night, but almost survive
Hmm.
at the end. The ones that are comfortable enough to know when they're weak, when they're strong, how to deal with it. These guys know we're going to put our little commune way, 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 way out, even though it's near the zombies. It's away from all of you guys, and it's our own little paradise. And we know you're not going to do anything with us because you need us. Without the engineer and without the pilot, you don't have a prayer. So we got some armor,
Yeah.
and they realized that, and that was really good.
Mm.
And I love the scene where he tells that to Sarah. Says the rest of you better watch your ass.
Right. Yeah. He could have literally shot you and it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said that was a good scene. I mean, there are a bunch of good scenes in this. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well,
And
that's a good segue.
I think, I mean, what are yours? What are some of your favorites other than, I know you like the gore stuff.
Well, I mean, I like I like Tom Savini is one of the most unique special effects artists there is out there because
Mm-hmm.
he is a magician. If you've ever seen that bio, I can't think of the name of it, but there's a documentary out on Tom Savini, and he basically does sleight of hand stuff. making you expect something, and he does it in a way that makes it look so real it jars you. Instead of putting a machete into a fake arm, he takes a round hunk of the machete out and does it into a real arm so that the hand can still move while the machete is in it, and it's like jarring because it looks so real. He did it with a machete in the head in Dawn of the Dead.
I think what makes him work so well is, and it's covered in one of the documentaries, is that he was a cinematographer. He was a filmmaker
photographer in Vietnam.
in Vietnam. So he even said in a quote, I design effects, but that also dictates the editing. So I create this effect as portion one of the effect, and it has to be shot this way. This other shot is shot two. And the final one is shot three.
So it's like a magician.
Yeah, like you said, he knows the tricks and knows the craft well enough, as opposed to like even Rob Bottin in those interviews talking about The Thing says, we set it up and did it, but we don't know. Hopefully it'll work.
And I think in that documentary, I watched 2 documentaries on this film. He mentions The Thing in one of them. So even Savini has admiration for that movie. But
but Rob Bottin was so young and so new. He was just making the effects. He wasn't talking about how to direct it, how to light it, how to show it, whatever. And that's why he talks about that story where Carpenter wanted a little bit of flame so that it would look like the rest of the room was on fire. And when they lit the thing, it blew up the prosthetics because of all the gas that they were using and stuff. And they had to rebuild the whole makeup.
Oh my gosh.
Whereas Savini is just so, but he's also very, I think he's been, Romero was a great, like you said, assist to him and using a lot of money, throwing a lot of money at him, saying, experiment, try new things, think what you can. And he perfected it. I mean, the blood in this is definitely not Dario Argento blood. It looks good. It works.
The makeup's grayer and less blue in most cases.
Less blue.
Which looks better too. Yeah.
He changes stuff out, like missing jaws and stuff, and he didn't have green screen to do that like they do now with Walking Dead and Game of Thrones and all of that. So all of that is practical or puppetry, and it's just really good.
And his robotic heads, like the eyes move in all of them, and it's amazing how realistic they look.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people get pulled apart in this movie. As a matter of fact, they may do that more often than needed.
I agree.
If you want to talk about scenes, though, I mean, obviously the scene with Bub listening to the music.
Oh gosh, yeah,
that's a great scene. The scene where Sarah goes out into the caves and I don't know if they're a gay couple or not, but they certainly live together. And I'd never really thought of it before because in the 80s, you didn't really see gay couples in movies. But John and McDermott have their own like Winnebago paradise out in the cave. That scene where she goes out there, they can all relax. And then John tells the Ken Foree story of this is what's happening. God's doing this. We have no control. Why are you trying to fight it? And I love that speech. Great speech.
They got all the records out here. Yeah, I love that. It's called
We need to have babies and teach them never to come and dig this stuff up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
I think that's a great scene. The first scene with Dr. Frankenstein is good when she sneaks in and observes him and he's watching, and then he explains everything to her and she realizes that he's actually dug up one of the soldiers and has experimented on.
Well, no, he swapped the bodies so that he would have fresh meat to feed the zombies.
Yeah. So there's that. I like, you said the scene with the music. I think Bub's first scene is great. His intro and the way that he's showing the conditioning of him and everything else. I liked that. He's da da da, but he's never seen the book before. And it's Salem's Lot, which is, wink, wink, nod, nod. And again, I liked the very ending. I liked the way he ended this one. I know other people didn't, and I read some reviews where people hated that ending.
Oh, it's fine.
But I even liked it from a jump scare perspective. For get in the helicopter, the zombie jumps out, and suddenly she wakes up on the beach. and realizes that was a nightmare.
Yeah, well, you've
Which
got the
is how
recurring
it
motif
started.
of her nightmares. She
Yep.
has three, and
Yep.
there's one at the beginning, one in the middle, and one at the end. And that's
Mm-hmm.
I'm completely happy with that unity. My
Mm-hmm.
OCD appreciates that. But I also appreciate the arc of all three movies because the first movie has a Shyamalan twist where the guy you think is going to survive gets shot, so it's unhappy. The
Mm-hmm.
second movie is questioning whether or not they will survive. They just fly away. And then the
Mm-hmm.
third movie actually does have a happy ending. So I kind of like the arc of the three
Yeah.
films as well.
And I like the fact that Romero shows different aesthetic. Night of the Living Dead was very black and white with lots of Scotch angles and lots of
Hmm.
close-ups and all of that. Dawn has a lot more action to it and a lot more bigger scenes and bigger area that he's dealing with. And then this one has such great lighting in places and such a cool aesthetic in general, because how do you take gray zombies in dirty costumes and in a gray cave and distinguish them?
I'll tell you how
So,
you, and it's a key, is you light it like creep show in places,
hmm
and he does. I mean, it's very colorful in places.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a couple of times when the red siren lights are on and there's lots of blood spilling.
Yeah, and you
So,
don't see
yeah.
the blood because of the red light. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
So
Any other scenes?
those are my three biggest ones, really. Fourth was the ending.
I
What
mean,
about you?
almost any scene with Bob. I mean, the scene where he pulls the gun on the commander, what's his face, Rhodes. That's
Yeah,
good.
that's the
Uh,
same one as the music one. I think it's the same scene.
it's got the drum like the
Yeah.
yeah, where it's like
No,
a sting, I guess you'd call it.
yeah, because that's also the same one where he salutes and the major or the colonel or whatever won't salute back,
Right.
and Frankenstein gives him the gun, which is great because he like "Da, da, da, da," and then goes, and you're thinking what, and he literally fires it and then
Yeah.
goes huh,
And he
and
doesn't
pecks it.
hesitate. It clicks almost
No,
immediately. Yeah.
and I love the fact you see the reaction of the colonel or whatever go. I mean, he bucks with that. He was going to shoot
Hmm.
me. He literally would have shot me. And he's going,
Yeah.
yeah, he would, which he does foreshadow. Guess what?
Yeah. And I love how they do show him feed, so he is still eating. I like the music scene where Frankenstein reaches for the headphones and Bub grabs his hand. And I mean, that is scary. You are like, "Ooh," your hand is right next to that zombie's mouth
Yep,
and
yep,
nothing happens. I think one of the reasons I love this movie so much is that Romero is not standing still doing it over and over again. He is making this story evolve.
mm-hmm,
And he went on, of course, this is a good segue to production stuff. For those of you that don't know, this was going to be like the series finale, and it was going to be epic. Everyone said the script, which I sent you a copy of last night. I don't know if you got it, the original
yeah,
script. I've never read it. They said it was like, I've heard it described as Gone with the Wind with zombies. I've heard it described as Raiders of the Lost Ark with zombies. It is supposed, I've heard Ben-Hur with zombies because it was so epic in scale. And he was going to do it with a $7 million budget, but he would not release it as an R-rated film because he wanted Savini to make it the gore or put the gore in it that was necessary.
yep.
And in order to get an X rating and not an R rating, he had to have his budget cut in half, which made him rewrite this script and condense it down to its smaller parts and
Okay.
or its big parts but in smaller form. And I honestly think that may have been a good thing. I think that's why this movie is so good, is because it is concentrated.
Well, and because he maybe had to rethink it. Because I think we've said before, a lot of major big budget movies suck because they have too much money and they aren't able to be creative and inventive around it. Because smaller budget means you got to think out of the box. You got to figure out how to do it with that less money.
Well, and a case in point is a major studio gave him the money to do Land of the Dead, where he could finalize this concept. And I'm telling you, that movie has CGI effects, and it is just, and it has big stars like Dennis Hopper, and it is not good.
Oh, okay. I've never
So,
seen it.
yeah, I mean,
So,
I would rather take the original three films than Land of the Dead any day.
huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but good point in the fact that, yeah, sometimes too much money is not a good thing. Look at
No.
Avatar. Anyway, but yeah, so I think I do think it may have been, was it rushed in production? Did he still have to meet the same deadlines or something?
I don't
Because
think so. I think they had like over a month of filming because they talked about how horrible it was being down in those mines for 3 weeks or whatever.
yeah, but I mean in pre-production for like writing it and everything else,
Oh,
was he, oh, we still have a start date in September and you better get the script ready
well,
and cut it down.
I don't know. I honestly don't.
I was just curious because again, I think there's just a little bit more in Dawn to me thematically going on between the couple and society and what's going to happen and the collapse and how do we go and what's happening, and then we finally get a peaceful haven and we get attacked by humans, of course, rather than zombies, and they destroy everything like they always do. So
Romero went on to do three more zombie movies, and they really, to me, are not that connected to the original three. One is a
okay,
big budget one that he would consider connected to the three. Then one was a found footage experiment, and then the third one was just bizarre. I won't even get into that. But
okay,
this movie, Romero lived much longer and did other zombie movies, and he has personally said that this is his favorite movie of all of them.
Mm.
So I thought that was telling.
Yeah,
It
well,
was a happy accident, I guess, maybe.
he had come from Night Riders, which is a Romero movie I really, really liked. Ed
Hmm.
Harris is great in it. It's a good story. It's very unique and different and something you wouldn't think about, like a motorcycle gang that inhabits all of the King Arthur motifs
Love it.
and stuff. It's a great
Hmm.
movie. And he
And then
did
Creep
something
Show. He did
else.
Creep Show as well.
Oh yeah, Creep Show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which we've already covered and we both like. So it
This was
works.
the third of a three-picture deal he had.
Mm.
So
With Saul Zaentz, wasn't it Saul Zaentz that produced?
I have no idea.
I think so.
But
Yeah.
somebody, and whoever was giving him money that cut it in half.
Yeah. I think it was Saul who said, "No, I've got to have a rating if you're
Yeah.
going to do it." And he goes, "Well, then I'm not." And he goes, "Well, then you can't have my money."
And do you know who he is? Is he famous for something, Saul Zant?
He's done about, let me look it up while you go
Okay,
into
sure.
production, because my
All right, I
question for production
mentioned
is I don't know where this was filmed. Where was this filmed?
some of it was obviously on location in Florida, but I think a lot of it was in Pittsburgh. There is a mine in the movie that is real near Waupun, Pennsylvania. It was converted into a long-term storage facility for documents. Though, as soon as I read this, I thought of the X-Files. I was like, there was lots of files. Uh, Though the mine maintained a constant temperature of about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, its high humidity played havoc with the equipment and props. Electrical failures were a constant problem throughout filming and caused several of Savini's props to fail during the filming. I think this is also why they had to animate the shooting of the guns, because they were underground or because they wouldn't work or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Because you can tell that the gunshots are animated. The remote location also complicated transportation of the crew members and equipment. The cast and crew would often sleep in the mine overnight to avoid time-consuming travel to the location. So that's what I was telling you. I mean, you remember when we used to hang out in that cave back in the 80s? That's what it reminds me of. It's like if you had to live in that. That'd be awful.
For a month. Yeah.
Right. And it was enormous. And according to lots of members of the crew and cast in that documentary, they said it was a scary place.
I was wrong. The name, it's not Saul Zaentz, it's Salah Hassanin. Hassanin. He's Egyptian. Hassanin.
That's several more
And
syllables.
yes, but a three-picture deal: Night Riders, Creep Show, Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
So yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, they must have still been independent movies though, because well, no, Creepshow was a pretty major release, but Night Riders was not,
No, it was not. And it
and
didn't
this
do well.
tanked. Day of the Dead tanked. It's become a cult movie since its release, but it tanked when it opened, which was really probably very similar to Romero as the loss of Carpenter with The Thing tanking 3 years prior.
Yeah.
That's a good parallel, actually, now that I think about it, because I think Romero had high hopes for this movie. I mean, if you saw the documentary, a lot of the actors had high hopes for it. The guy that played John said, I thought I was going to get a lot of jobs from this, and he didn't.
Well, and he should have. He was
Yeah,
really strong. Another Romero trait, strong black actors in his
right.
films.
Well, and that
Um,
guy, and another Romero trait is this is the last film he did using people he constantly reused from Pittsburgh. The guy that I mentioned, well, I'll get this and I'll get into it in casting, I guess. But
yeah.
a lot of these people are from past Romero films or past Romero connections, and they all come from Pennsylvania. So it's another. We were talking about him being a little hippie-esque, like Stephen King. He believed in bringing money to his home state and doing things
Hmm.
there,
Yeah.
which is honorable as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and he did it well. He knew the areas. He could do it. He could pick it. So, I mean, and it works for me. Again, I think the only thing is, nah, you're not going to find a missile silo in Florida. That's not
No,
going to
I was
happen.
like, why would
But
they? You can't dig that deep in Florida, I don't think.
no, 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 no.
I did think that was funny. I mentioned that the original script had the military living safely underground. It involved a small army of trained zombies, and the conclusion of the trilogy more brutal than obviously the release. It was supposed to be a much more brutal movie than the version that we got. This later became the basis for Land of the Dead, which does revisit themes of Romero, basically rich versus the poor, because there's this
Hmm.
skyrise building where everyone that has money survives and all the dead still roam outside. But it's just not a good movie. I want to like it. I really want to like it, but I'm not a fan. So that's really all the production I think I have.
The only trivia or production I have other that you haven't covered is Tom Savini wanted to play Rhodes
He did.
and probably should have. You
I think
know,
he
I
would have
mean,
been better, but
I
I think
don't
he would have been confused with the character from Dawn of the Dead, though, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. He could have done something different and maybe shaved the mustache or done something. But I've seen him act in stuff since then and been really strong and good. So I think he could have done Rhodes much better than Palillo or whoever the guy is that plays him.
Pilano, yeah, I think that's his name.
Yeah. But that's just my opinion. I did not like his performance and I did not like Steele's writing. I like the actor, but I did not like the writing of Steele. The ultra macho giggle, drink beer the whole time, blah blah blah. I didn't care for that. But
I didn't mind it because he juxtaposes it with serious moments, like when Rhodes orders him to kill Sarah. There's you see some good change there in his look, and then there's I want to say there's another serious scene with him, and then the scene where he dies. You find out that he's Catholic and he does the genuflect before he blows his brains out.
yeah, he didn't get the one he deserved. He deserved to have like his wee bit off or something.
Well,
You
he
know, it
did get
was
his
just
neck
like
ripped out. That's pretty, or his
big
shoulder or
deal.
something. Yeah. Lots
Big
of
deal.
people
No,
meet untimely deaths in this
he
movie.
deserved it. I've got it in my notes. Steele did not get the death he deserved.
But I
So
mean, the other people did that other little Weasley one. I can't think of his name.
I
That's
think it's Rickles.
okay. He acted like Don Rickles. He was just
Yeah.
horrible. I mean, his eyeball basically gets ripped out as his head's getting ripped off. He gets a good death.
Yeah, he gets a good one.
Yeah.
And other guy that we didn't care about who only had two lines gets a great death with the whole ripping in half
Yeah. And
kind of thing.
Nicotero's head makes an encore appearance.
Yeah. And of course, Rhodes, choke on him, choke on him.
Yeah,
You know,
whatever. He lived much longer than he should have when they pulled him apart. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think he would be talking when half his body's being dragged away. No.
No, no.
All right, cast maybe.
Sure.
Dr. Sarah Bowen is I guess you'd say, the lead of the movie. She is played by Laurie Cardille. She is a stage actress. She is still doing occasional movies. She's out there if you folks want to look her up. Her connection to Romero is Chili Bill Cardille from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, old horror movie host, like Shock Theater or whatever.
Oh, okay.
He was the interviewer in Night of the Living Dead and played himself as Bill Cardille. So she is his
so
daughter.
like a Svengoolie guy. He did the local horror show or whatever, right?
Yeah, but
Okay.
in Night of the Living Dead, he's basically a news reporter.
Okay.
And you can recognize him. He's got a very prominent scene in Night of the Living Dead, and they were friends. He and Romero were friends, and Romero had gone to New York to see a play. I forget the name of it, and Laurie was the star of it. And he said, "Oh, I can use her in my next movie."
Yeah, she's good.
Yeah, and that's how she got cast. I think
Well, you can tell that she and John both, I think, have theater jobs.
they do, for
Yeah.
sure. And speaking of which, John is next in the cast list. He's played by Terry Alexander. He is still doing the occasional movies. Someone did audition for this. You want to take a guess as who auditioned for the John role and didn't get it?
Samuel Jackson.
Tony Todd.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And didn't get it?
He didn't, but Savini noticed him and cast him in the remake of Night of the Living Dead 4 years later.
Wow. The color one. Yeah.
Yes.
So this was before Candyman, right?
Yes. Candyman was 1992. But Tony Todd was already, I want to say, maybe a Klingon on Next Generation or something. He was acting then, for sure.
Or if it was the 80s, he was, yeah.
Right, right. And so he auditioned for it and was memorable enough that Savini cast him as Ben in the remake of Night of the Living Dead, the color remake in 1989. So, but anyway, I like Terry Alexander. I think he's great. He says the reason he got it was because he could do a West Indies accent.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. And as soon as he was talking about it, he slipped into it, which was funny. Captain Henry Rhodes was played by Joseph Pilato. He's just way too over the top. As I mean, he is supposed to be an asshole, but he's like a maniacal asshole, and I think the maniacal needed to be toned down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we talk in theater class about have some place to go. Don't start out at 9 because then you can only go to 10. Start out at 2 so you have some place to go and level it. There are times when you're 9, times when you're back to 2, times when you're up to 9, times when you're back. And he doesn't. He is 10 all out all the time, starey, big-eyed, screaming, yelling from the very beginning. And he's got no substance.
And I saw an interview with him in that documentary where he said, George, please don't let me go too far. So some of that is George too.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah, George should have made him pull back.
Yeah. I think it would have, and there's no, like you said, maniacal. Imagine if he had the scene where she turns around and says, "What did you just say?" And he says, "I said, I'll have you, if you leave this room, I'll have you shot." Right? Mm-hmm. Instead, he says that with the same intensity he said the line before. If he had just gone back and smiled and been really quiet about it, we would have been really terrified.
Right. And then later on, if he's quiet, you see the same intensity.
Yeah. That's what made Hannibal Lecter so scary, was he didn't
because he wasn't. Yes, exactly.
And it may have been the circumstances too. I mean, these guys were underground, like you said, for a month, and they were supposed to be desperate and at the end of their ropes and yada yada, but you got to play scenes differently.
Yeah, and at his death scene where he does literally get pulled apart, the offal or whatever that they were using, the real animal guts, had already started rotting and stinking, so they were encased and you couldn't smell them until he was pulled apart. And you talk about awful conditions. I don't know if you saw it on the documentary, but they show the scene, and when
Oh
they
yeah.
cut, those zombies are turning around and covering their faces, and Pilato is puking.
Yeah, they said that
It's just a big
Savini said,
cloud of nastiness. Bah.
yeah, Savini said they went away to shoot something else. They were gone for like 3 days, and somebody had unplugged the refrigerator with
Oh,
all of the guts in it. So when they got back, already the makeup studio smelled horrible. They had to stuff all this in him. And he said they were wearing gas masks and masks and everything while they were setting up the makeup.
yeah, yeah, they were.
So yeah,
And
they
he
said it
had a
was,
mask on him before they shouted
yeah.
action or whatever, too.
And before we leave him, just to say too, I think he's also hampered a little bit again by George not reining him in, but also by George is in the writing. We never see a soft side to Rhodes. We never see a scene where he remembers something and is sad or mad or happy or laughs with the guys or has a moment.
Yeah, all he had to do
Every
was look at a picture of him and his girlfriend, who's obviously dead, and that would have been
and
enough.
that's why he wants to get out of there. And but we don't get anything. We don't get any character depth to him at all, other than I'm going to scream and I'm the big honcho in charge.
Yeah, and he does. He screams the whole time, which is
Yeah.
that's even more. It takes away from his
Annoying.
character.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
His connection though to George is that he played the police officer at the dock when they're taking off in the helicopter. There's several police officers. He's not the one that asked for cigarettes. He's another one. And apparently a lot of his character got cut in that film, but it's in the Dario Argento cut.
Okay. You're talking about in Dawn,
In Dawn,
in
1978, like
the
8 years
opening
earlier.
montage bit.
Or 7 years earlier. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Mhm.
And a lot of fans, you know how fans jump in and want to connect things like with X-Files or Star Trek or whatever. A lot of fans want to say it's the same character, that his cop went on, but it doesn't make any sense. His cop would not have gone on into the military when the world's already ending. So,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
sorry.
Did not graduate West Point and keep going. No.
Right. Bill McDermott, I don't think, I mean, he's still acting, but he doesn't care about his IMDb profile. He doesn't even have a picture. But he was in the True Grit remake. That was it.
Mhm.
Jeff Bridges, I think, that
Jeff
did
Bridges.
it. Yeah, he's played by Jarlath Conroy. If I had to describe him, I would say he's the Dr. McCoy of this movie.
Yep.
He reminds me of DeForest Kelly. He's drinking a lot. He always has a funny line, but he's reliable when you need him. And that's Doc McCoy from the original Star Trek, big time.
Yep. Very good.
Yeah,
I love
very
that
likable.
comparison. Mhm.
Likable because he and John don't give a shit about those other people because they're all crazy. Or
They know their place and they know what
Right.
these guys do. Yeah.
Miguel Salazar is played by Anthony DeLeo Jr. I have mixed emotions about this actor. I
Me too.
hated him when I first watched this movie in the 80s. And then watching it again a couple of nights ago, I realized, well, you really are supposed to hate him. So he's doing the job. I mean,
I disagree. I think you're supposed to feel sorry for him. And I don't
Okay.
think we do enough.
No, I don't feel sorry for him at all.
Because Sarah, our protagonist, feels sorry for him because she's sleeping with him.
She has a
They're
relationship.
obviously dating, and she even states it 2 or 3 times. He's losing it. You don't understand. It's not safe to have him up here. He needs to be sedated and needs time, whatever. And I just think there needed to be, again, 1 or 2 lines that just gave him some reason for feeling this self-defeating. Maybe he's had a dream too where I don't think I'm going to live. I don't think I'm going to make it. And that would tie in so well to the end when he intentionally commits suicide. So just something else to him, because again, he's one note like Rhodes is. He's just basically hysterical and crying the whole time.
Yeah, and he's not. Yeah, I can't identify with that.
There's no layer. There's no levels. So,
And I read. I mean, I didn't read. I saw the documentary where he states that it was difficult for him to play because he was it was not filmed chronologically, so he was in different states of hysteria in different times,
Right.
and they
Yeah.
all kind of blur together into the same to me. He's
Yeah.
like, and he's just not very likable. He has some noble moments, like you said, when he kills himself and lets all the zombies invade the place, takes them down
Yeah.
with him. But he is another Romero stock player. He's predominantly a Romero actor. He doesn't really do a lot of other movies other than George Romero movies. And
Mm.
Night Riders was one. And then he also did one. He did Monkey Shines. I think that followed this movie. I can't remember when
Okay.
that came out. Late 80s, I think. Anyway, he was played by Miguel Salazar, if I didn't say that. Dr. Matthew Logan is Dr. Frankenstein,
Hmm.
and his nickname is Frankenstein. He's played by Richard Liberty. He died in 2000. He died a good while ago.
Oh,
He was in Romero's movie, The Crazies,
okay.
and I don't remember that movie. It's on my list to rewatch because it's time that I rewatch it. But so that's his connection to Romero. And to me, he's one of the strongest actors in this movie. He is great.
Definitely. He's great. I've even got in my notes. So the movie starts with the doctor's entrance. I love his dialogue there because he never refers to the zombies on a personal level. Everything is it. It wants this now. This is it. And even realizing that used to be the colonel that was in charge of the base, and you've taken his face off and left part of his brain, and you call it it. And his dialogue with Rhodes is great about, and are you going to kick the shit out of them now or whatever?
Yeah. Well, where are you going to
You
go?
know.
The world's entirely dead. Are you going to, what is it, blow the piss out of them?
Blow the piss out of them then? He says, oh, they do outnumber us, Colonel, by about 3 million to 1.
Oh, and
You
I
know,
love his introduction when he is just
Yes.
walking around the lab and there's blood everywhere. It's all over him. It's on the walls. He is just like, and it's like totally normal to him. He's waving his hands and there's blood all over his gloves. It's just
Yeah.
like, what is this guy?
It's a great
The whole time I was
entrance.
watching it, I was like, I wish I had the power to just for once switch him and Herbert West from Reanimator and have them play the opposites. Like have
Oh,
Herbert West in this movie as Frankenstein and
yeah.
have what is his name? I can't think of his name. Jeffrey Combs. Have
Yeah.
Jeffrey Combs in here as Frankenstein and put Matthew Logan or no, excuse me, Richard Liberty as Herbert
Uh-huh.
West. That would be fun
That would be fun.
because they are
That
the
would be
same
fun.
character basically.
Yeah, and he's great all the way through. His death is great. His scenes with Bub are great. His deterioration works because you start to see him slipping and losing it. And so yeah, great casting. Good job.
hmm And speaking of Bub, he is next. He was played by Sherman Howard, but it was billed as Howard Sherman at the time. He is still working. He has tons of credits. So I would say he is probably the most successful actor from this movie, and he doesn't even have a line unless you call Alicia a line.
Right. Yeah, and I saw in the documentary that one of the reasons they hired him was because he had mime training.
hmm
So that helped him with a lot of the non-dialogue stuff, which is
And
great.
Savini did such good makeup on him.
Mm-hmm.
He is like one of the best looking zombies I've ever seen. He's right up there with the little guy, Scott Redinger from Dawn of the Dead, that ends
Yes.
up getting zombified and they have to kill
And
him
he's
as well.
a little too blue. So in that respect, this one's a much
Right.
better makeup. So yeah, it's really good. And the way he has him walk, the way he's playing with the chain and it drops, and the way he figures stuff out and goes, and you can see the brain working and thinking, and it's just going, this is a zombie. This is great.
Yeah. I mean, I think Romero gave him the direction to play it like a baby, like a newborn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does it so well. He's a very good actor. I saw somewhere, it might have been the documentary, where Laurie Cardille may have even had a crush on him because he's very handsome outside of the makeup.
Okay.
So he has a good
Okay.
face. And I saw an interview with him where he talked about what a pleasure it was working with Richard Liberty as Frankenstein. He said
Oh,
they
I'm sure.
did a lot of it was improv. Like him grabbing Richard Liberty's hand was improv. And that reaction, and man, that's a great moment in that movie.
That's a great moment.
Yeah, it is
Well,
awesome.
later on, when he wags his finger in front of him, And he's doing that, and you're going, he will bite that off.
Yes.
They will bite you. No.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. I was going to show a picture of him, but
Yeah, there he
there
is.
it is. The private Walker Steele, who you do not like, he's the big
Yep.
guy that's second in command, I would say, is played by Gary Howard Clark. He died in 2020. Unfortunately, he stopped acting around 1999. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing, but he's in that documentary as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that documentary came out like 2013, I think.
I have in my notes, I just hate the cliche, bigoted, stupid, giggling, drinking beer on duty,
Well,
stupid
that's because you
military.
hate that kind of person.
I do. I just don't like those characters, though, either. I don't
The
like them as
problem
characters.
is that if it was just him, it would have been fine. The other guys are like that too. The one that's his closest friend is like a carbon copy of him, and that's the problem to me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
They are all
So much
giggly,
so that I don't
bigoted,
even have him in my cast list.
misogynistic. I mean, they're just bad people. And that's fine if as long as you don't play them that cartoony. And they cartooned it up, in my opinion. But that's
Yeah.
just
I have one other casting note that you might be surprised by. The zombies moaning and groaning and growling and roaring and feasting sounds all happen to be played by a talented voice actor. Do you know who that is?
hmm,
Mark Dodson. Does that name ring a bell?
vaguely, but I'm not sure where I place it.
Well, he's
Too.
Salacious Crumb, Jabba the Hutt's sidekick
Ah.
and court jester. Yeah, that little guy that was annoying in Return of
Mhm.
the Jedi. So anyway, that actor did a lot of the overdubs, I guess you would say,
Okay,
for
that's
the
cool.
zombies. This movie did win a few awards, believe it or not. The Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror gave it a Saturn Award for Best Makeup, which was truly deserved. And then the Sitges Catalonian International Film Festival gave Laurie Cardille a win for Best Actress, which
She's
I thought
strong in
was,
this all the way
yeah,
through.
very strong. The movie is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list. I kind of agree with it. I'm back and forth about it. It is definitely a period piece.
It definitely is. But we've covered more period pieces in different periods. So I mean, that's fine for the time.
The music's really dated.
But I do think the music in this is better than Dawn. So
Yeah, probably some of it.
it's better. It's got better beats than Dawn. In other words, it's sequenced, I think, and appropriate better. Because in Night he was only using library music. In Dawn he had compositions, but it was basically like
Italian,
a very
Italian rock band.
Italian-y sounding.
Yeah,
This is more synth,
synthesizer.
but it works better, I think. And I also like the homage. I've got in my notes one of the things I like, it may be a key even, is when he goes, you can just sit here in the dark and think about what you've done. And he flips the light on. He goes, think about it. And he closes the door and it cuts to the zombie and you hear dun dun dun
Yeah,
dun dun dun. And I went, okay, that's a nice little wink.
it's a great little tag. Very, very much so.
So yeah.
And I had something. I thought I had something about the guy that did the music, but I don't see it. So maybe I didn't put it in there. He hasn't done a lot, but he had done something. Anyway, it's not important. So yeah, it's not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die. Did you have any other trivia or comments that you might want to talk about before we move on to Keys?
I just want to emphasize it's even in some of the pictures you have. The lighting in this is really strong. I love the fact that they use almost a fluorescent look, overhead look when they're in the military outposts, but when they're in the room where they're watching Bub, they're all lit from underneath. It's just spooky and shadowy and looks really cool. And then the scene in the Ritz is that when they're outside in that little they're in the cave, but they've made it look like it's outside the Winnebago with palm trees and chairs and a backdrop and everything else. All of that lighting is gold and beautiful and warm and nice. And you're just going, and it's the happiest feeling moment in the movie. I think it's really cool the way whoever he had as cinematographer did a really strong job
Yeah,
of that.
it's actually I'm trying to think of the right term, but it predicts the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And he
the
goes, we ought
happy
to be on
ending.
a
Yeah.
beach somewhere, Sarah, making babies. You know,
Maybe she didn't want to make a baby with you.
don't have
I
much
don't think
choice.
that's
There's
what he
only
meant at
two of
all.
us.
I think he meant just in general. Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
It's a great scene.
Yeah, it is. It's one of, it should be one of Romero's best in there.
The
I've
other
got in
thing
my,
I have that's a
yeah.
little bit of trivia is I mentioned that the facility they shot in was not a soundstage. It was shot in this mine in Wampum, Pittsburgh. It is a 2,500,000 square foot mine that is now operated. That's crazy. That can't be right. Can it?
Oh, yeah.
Can
Mines
it
are
really be that big?
huge. Oh, yeah. Well, they were
Okay,
driving golf carts around it.
that's true.
I mean, it was
Um,
huge.
It is now operated as the Gateway Commerce Center and referred to as a subsurface storage facility. So it is that mine in the X Files. It is just a
Yeah,
bunch of like
essentially.
file
Yep.
cabinets full of information on smallpox vaccinations.
Smallpox vaccinations by the government
Right,
containing alien DNA. Yes, of
right,
course.
right.
That's what this is.
So that was the one little thing about the filming, and then I'm assuming they just shot for a few days down in Florida so that they could, unless they planted some palm trees in Pennsylvania.
No, I think that's what they said in the documentary, that like the last 2 weeks of filming were in Florida. That's
Okay,
when they shot all of the
yeah. Well, and
exteriors.
I want to say that scene we liked so much was one of the last scenes they shot too, but I can't remember. Anyway,
Anything on top of the missile silo, like the guy watering the pot
the pot,
plants
yeah.
and the zombies at the gates and the
Hmm.
zombies coming down, all the opening helicopter footage with the alligator and the zombies and all that was in Florida the last 2 weeks of shooting.
That was something I was going to mention in casting. Did any of these zombies look familiar to you?
Well, I mean, other than the caricature ones like they did in, one of the things he kept from Dawn was you see a little kid zombie who's wearing a football uniform or a cheerleader zombie, but no, not facially did I recognize. I know from production he used a lot of press, right? If you were a newspaper reporter, television reporter, whatever, and you showed up on set, he made you up as a zombie.
Right. It's twofold, I
Mm-hmm.
guess you would say. That woman zombie behind me
Mm-hmm.
is clearly the majorette zombie from when they're in the streets of whatever town that is in Florida. That's the same
Okay.
actor.
Okay.
And right before the alligator comes down the street, though, there's a rather rotund zombie coming towards the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that's the one that fell in the waterfall or the water fountain in Dawn of the Dead, because Romero said, I want you to get me all the actors that were zombies in the original Dawn of the Dead, and we're going to make them zombies in this movie.
Oh, that makes sense.
So
Good
some
idea.
of them have two roles, like that woman behind me. And if I'm not mistaken, she could have been the nurse in Dawn of the Dead. That's
Yep.
in the glass. She looks very similar in build. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
he recycles people playing the good zombies. And I guess it makes sense because those two behind are really good zombies.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can't go without mentioning the fact that the title shot in this, the puppet that he uses, is pretty freaking phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
The one with no jaw and everything else, it's staggering, and that was really good makeup.
Oh, and from what I understand, it was an accident. Like he was having trouble with the jaw, so he just left it off.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it broke, and so he just said, "Leave it off, and we'll just go with that," and it
Yeah.
worked. It worked great.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
very creepy.
yeah.
So I guess we're going to move on to keys.
Yes, we can.
And I mean,
Um,
there's a ton, and they're mostly zombie movies.
I have some that are, yeah, well, I think, yeah, we've got to go with, of course, his original two, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. Both of them are influences on this, just like you said, even recycling the zombies, trying to augment the blue makeup so it worked better. The whole sequencing of whatever haven you have is going to be overrun and everybody's going to have a feast. We're going to have a feast scene. So all of those are in there. My first one, though, that I have is the stuff.
Really?
Because what struck me most when I was saying, okay, now just focus on Keys is Rhodes is this overbearing military guy that is just dominating the plot, and I don't think he's necessary, and I hate his character. And it's the same way I felt about the Servino
Paul
general
Sereno?
and stuff. So,
Okay. Well, and
so
it
it,
is also, like you said, a big caricature. So,
yeah, it's
mhm.
that overbearing general thing that is in there.
My strongest key, and I didn't realize this. You remember I told you that I'm in the preliminary stages of a second book,
Hmm.
a zombie book, like a sequel. And a lot of this movie, I realize I am very influenced by because a lot of very similar things are happening. It's not underground, but there's definitely corralling and experimenting going on. And The Walking Dead obviously is a key to this, but I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
realize how strong of a key The Walking Dead is to this. Like while watching this, I was like, I think this is the first movie where they amputate a limb and the guy lives.
Oh,
I don't
yep.
think it happened before then. And it is a strong tie to Herschel's leg being amputated in the third season of The Walking Dead.
Hmm.
So that's major. That's a major connection as far as I'm concerned.
Oh
Also,
yeah.
the fact that the world is falling apart. There are the military clan versus the scientist clan versus the regular humans is
Hmm.
all very Walking Dead to me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. 28 days later, too. Military and zombies. That one of
Yeah.
mine.
Military.
Uh, Alien, a really strong female lead from the very beginning. And that was just not very even in the 80s, you had female leads, but they weren't strong. They were the scream queens or the survivor girl or the last girl, final girl,
Did you
whatever.
say alien or aliens?
Either one, but
I was
definitely
going to say
alien.
aliens has got all the military in it.
Yep. Yep. So
Okay.
aliens might be even a better.
Definitely a stronger. Well, I mean, Ripley's strong in both movies, but she's definitely stronger in Aliens.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
And that can segue into any of the 80s slashers or even the late 70s, early 80s slashers, the Halloween Nightmare, all that where we're following a female protagonist. It's her POV for most of the movie.
Very
Whether
good.
it's
And I meant to mention this earlier when we were talking about Savini, but his realistic effects really started with Friday the 13th. If any of you are not familiar with Savini's work as well, I don't know why you'd even be listening to us if you didn't know who Tom Savini is, but he was, I mean, Friday the 13th was known for realistic gore. And he had done Dawn of the Dead prior to that, but Friday the 13th was the very next year. So,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and it was more mainstream, of course. It was Columbia, I think.
Kevin Bacon arrow up the throat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Mm-hmm.
a guy in a wheelchair getting a machete in the face, very similar to Dawn of the Dead.
Yep.
So yeah, any of those like you said, this Final Girl slasher movies or Tom Savini slasher movies.
Yeah. I've
uh
got Frankenstein
yeah, that's a
because
good one.
you've got Bub and the doctor and the whole, we're all thinking, what have you created? And was this a good thing to do? But you also have, and I think it's even mentioned in one of the documentaries, his performance is like Karloff.
Yeah, it is.
He
Very much
doesn't
so.
have any vocals, but he's very memorable and
It's
very
iconic.
emotional and very iconic. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good comparison.
I agree, and you've got some literal there as well. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Frankenstein brought the dead back to life. This
Hmm.
Frankenstein is just basically experimenting with a dead man that's come back to life.
And
So,
still, if you think about it, domestication, trying to bring the dead back to life, he's still
mhm.
trying to bring some
And tame them.
consciousness to them. Yeah. Yeah.
I've
Um,
got one you're going to think is actually this is my only one that's not directly zombie related, but
uh-huh.
I have Planet of the Apes. And
Ooh.
it's the scene where John is telling the speech about raising babies and not letting them come and dig this stuff back up. It's the same thing with the cave and Dr. Zayas and Charlton Heston, where they find the doll. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah, I
it's
could
like,
see that.
yeah, I got a strong, like, it was almost one of those where the hairs go up on your arms. It reminded me so much of like Planet of the Apes there.
Yeah,
That
very true.
concept.
Well,
Yeah.
we can't let this happen again. Don't
And
let
Dr.
this.
Zayas
Yeah.
didn't want it. He didn't want people to find out about it.
Nope. No, no,
No,
no.
that humans were once in charge. So
I've got one you have to be an uber geek to actually know and do, but it's a key. But after anytime they go into the caverns or the corral, I guess you would call it, you hear wind. The wind effect is from the cage. It's from Star Trek's original pilot.
it's
Uh,
just canned.
yeah, it's a canned wind effect that is it's not just wind, it's a tone. It's like, ooh,
Interesting.
and it goes in the background. And you hear it every time they go to the corral.
Yeah.
So,
Another tie to Dawn of the Dead that I
mhm.
mentioned earlier is they do little stings with drums where it'll go rat-a-tat-tat, and it's a moment where someone pulls a gun or whatever. They do that a lot in Dawn as well, but in this, it's even amped up more because it sounds military. It's like to
Yes.
hear a snare drum like that reminds you of the military.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've
And
got
it's
the
not
thing.
synthesized.
I've
Not
got the
really.
thing, but it's a makeup effect, and it's the one where the third soldier, the one with the beard, gets killed, and Frankenstein has taken his head, and it's on the table, and the eyes are moving around, and the mouth is
That's
opening, and
Nicotero.
everything. Well, it reminded me of the thing right
Hmm.
before before the legs came out.
Or the tongue.
Yeah, the
Yeah. Yeah.
tongue.
That's something I guess we should mention that is also a tie to The Walking Dead. Is the fact that Greg Nicotero was very young. And I think he met Romero during Creepshow, maybe on the set,
Mm.
and then started doing stuff with Savini as far as effects. He ended up getting cast as a small role in this, and he has gone on to be like K&B effects miser, huge, like probably one of the most expensive special or one of the richest special effects people out there. And he's directing now, of course, as well.
Yeah, he's a
Um,
producer and director on Walking Dead.
Right. I mean, he produces and directs Walking Dead, and he basically started with this film. And his head, I think he still owns that head that Savini made of him, and it is really realistic. It is a
Yeah,
very realistic animatronic head.
that's
Yeah.
that's interesting. That may be a key too, because I know when we did the thing, we talked about Rob Bottin was actually worked on The Fog with John Carpenter and worked on makeup for it and even volunteered
Right.
and was one of the ghosts or whatever. Got his start there and went on to do the thing. And Nicotero gets his start here and goes on to do Walking Dead and so
Right.
much other else. Um, it's interesting that they are like a little family because Rob Bottin also assisted Dick Smith on a couple of projects. I can't remember which ones right now, but I remember that in my notes somewhere.
And Rick
Where
Baker, probably.
and Rick Baker did well. Rick Baker helped him on Exorcist.
Rick Baker helped. I'm
Dick
talking about maybe
Smith.
Rick and Rob may have
Yeah,
worked
and I think
together
Rick and
too.
Rob have done a couple of things together too. So they
Hmm.
are this family. And Savini's always been way over here because he's been the independent, just like Nicotero, but now they're folded into this whole
And I'm
makeup.
curious, I should look this up. I don't know where Nicotero is from and how he got connected. But I mean, Savinia and Romero both have the Pittsburgh connection. They were both from Pennsylvania. So I'm not sure
Nicotero
where
might be
Nicotero's
too.
from.
I mean, he might be too from that
He may be.
area. Yeah.
Yeah, he could be.
I think that's all my keys I
I
have
think it's
for
all the
that.
keys I have too. In summation, again, I went into this movie. I mean, this movie tanked and got a cult following very similar to The Thing, which is another key.
Yep.
It is very popular now. It has been remade into several low budget things, so it makes me wonder if it lost its copyright, very similar to the original movie, because
Mm.
some of them I haven't even tried to watch. They looked so bad. And I went into it thinking that, oh yeah, it's going to be the lesser of the three because I love Night of the Living Dead so much and I love Dawn of the Dead so much. But
Mm-hmm.
I was pleasantly surprised and was like, this is a damn good movie. I'm very happy with it, aside from a few overplayed characters.
Mm-hmm. And I went into it thinking I would like it. I did not like the beginning of it, and then suddenly loved it and thought it was really, really strong. I still think Dawn is probably my favorite just because I like the characters better.
And the concept of being in a
And I
shopping
like that.
mall. Yeah.
I like that concept of can we recreate our own little micro society and then have it destroyed, kind of thematic. But
And
but
the Romero theme.
But I think you've really done, I think you're right in the fact that this is a fitting end to the trilogy of what he was trying to tell without having seen Land, so I don't know. But I do
Well,
think
basically,
it's
there's another Bub
strong.
character in Land, and he's on his own, and it's not as memorable as the guy that plays Bub.
Yeah. See, it should be more like Conquest of the Planet where you have more than one Bub. He's trained other Bubs, and he has like his own
Well,
little
that is,
family.
they do that a little bit.
But anyway, that's what we think. We would love to know what you think. If you're new to us or if you're old to us, leave a comment down below. Do you agree with this? Did you like this? Did you listen to the whole thing? Watch the whole thing? We're glad you're with us. If you do like what we're doing, we would love to have your support. We have a Patreon channel, of course, and we would love to have you guys over there because we have
Join our
special
Patreon community.
Yes, we have special programs over there for depending on what tier you want, but it's for very, very minimalist subscription a month, and we would love to have you support us that way. But also tell everybody, tell your friends, go to Apple, give us a review, get more people, share us on social medias all over the place so people can find us and know
Yeah,
about
and
us.
if you want to know what movies we're doing ahead of time, you can go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. I send one out every Friday, I think it is, so that you have a
Mhm.
few days beforehand if you want to catch the film before we talk about it. And there are other ways to do that as well. We have promos in our Facebook group. Johnny has the keys. So
And see, we thought season 7 was just going to be all bad movies, and look what we did. We did a good one. So there you go.
no, I didn't
What?
say that. When did you say that? I think season 7 is going to be great, actually.
No, it's going to be great, but we started with Grindhouse and Star Trek. I mean, come
I don't,
on.
well, okay.
Okay.
I don't hate those
All right.
movies.
Well, that's my job.
Yeah.
I'll hate them for you. No. But no, Tim, thanks so much. I enjoy it every week. I can't wait till next week. It's going to be
Yeah,
fun.
me too. And I will see you then in
All right.
sci-fi land.
Yay. Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.